This episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by StatHero. StatHero is reshaping the way you play fantasy sports. Dozens of house-based games to play daily. No sharks, no funky props, just your skill versus the lineups you choose. Sign up today at stathero.com/locked on. On today's episode, I give you a 2023 recruiting class update for your Texas Longhorns football team. Sark announced the spring football roster. I'll tell you what stood out to me. And your Texas Longhorns baseball team finally lost a game, but they're still 11-1. We give them some praise. Happy Monday, Longhorn Nation.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Longhorns, your daily number one source for all things Texas athletics. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jonathan Davis, the voice of University of Texas football and basketball. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Longhorns your first listen of the day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube for exclusive content and to put a face behind the voice of your favorite podcast. Make sure you like us, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. Anything less than that, I have to believe you're not listening hard enough. Y'all know how we do it on this here podcast. Let's get right into it. So right now on the list of best states with the most blue chip prospects in the country, Texas comes in at number 2 with 36 blue chip prospects in the state of Texas in the 2023 recruiting class. Now, blue chip prospects are going to be your 5-star and your 4-star players combined. So right now, Texas has 36 of those. Florida is number 1 on the list with 38 5- and 4-star prospects in the state. The reason I brought this up as we get into the Texas Longhorns football team 2023 recruiting class is because I thought when UT was in their prime run with Mack Brown, he did a really good job of making sure that they didn't lose the top prospects in the state out of the state of Texas, and allowing teams like, LSU, Ohio State, Oklahoma to come in. They would get some, but the majority of top prospects in the state would come to the University of Texas. When Texas started to fall off, not only would those schools come in and pair talent away, but schools like Texas A&M, Baylor, TCU were able to do a better job of recruiting those prospects in the state and keeping them away from the 40 acres. And I thought Sark did a really good job last year with his number 5 recruiting class and being able to take over Texas once again and having those top prospects in the state, like Devin Campbell and Kelvin Banks, commit to the University of Texas. So we're going to give you a 2023 recruiting class update, just show you where things stand right now, who's already committed to the University of Texas, and then some top 100 prospects that the University of Texas has a realistic chance to get a commitment from. So it all starts with the number 1 prospect in the class. We've talked about him a lot on the podcast. I won't get into it too much today, but Arch Manning, the nephew of Peyton and Eli Manning, the number 1 prospect in the class, number 1 quarterback in the class out of Louisiana. He's considering 5 to 6 schools right now, but all signs pointing to him making a decision between Alabama and Texas. He's making his 3rd visit to the University of Texas on March 24th, looking to make a decision by the start of his senior year, I'm hearing. So hopefully Texas gets that commitment and lands the number 1 prospect in the class and the potential quarterback of the future in Arch Manning. So moving on to the next prospect on the list, the number 18 overall prospect, number 1 running back in this class, number 2 prospect in the state of Texas out of El Campo, Ruben Owens. In his junior year of high school, he had 2,989 rushing yards and 46 touchdowns, averaging almost 11 yards per carry. So he's a really explosive running back, has the power, speed, really good at identifying gaps and taking balls to the house. So just a really explosive player. He originally committed to Texas last year, then decommitted, but all signs point to him officially signing a letter of intent and coming to play football at the University of Texas and continuing that great pedigree of running backs at the 40 acres. 24/7 Sports gives Texas right now a 92% chance to land his commitment. Oklahoma has the other 8%. So all signs point to him putting on that burnt orange and white after next season. The next one is where it gets really interesting. The number 32 overall prospect, number one linebacker, the third best prospect in the state of Texas out of Denton, Anthony Hill, who would be a perfect fit as an off-ball linebacker in Pete Kwiatkowski's defense. He can do a little bit of everything. 24/7 Sports describes him as athletic, physical, a violent off-ball linebacker who occasionally steps to the line of scrimmage. Long-term positional home is in question, but his ability is not. A thumper versus the run with chase down athleticism from the backside, capable of consistent sideline to sideline pursuit with proven blitzing ability. So somebody that Pete Kwiatkowski and Gary Patterson can do a lot with. And I think when you look at the linebacker position right now and the future of the linebacker position at the University of Texas, that is probably the unit that is in the most in doubt, the unit where you're looking and saying, okay, where are we going to go next? If you get a prospect like Anthony Hill out of Texas, the number one linebacker in the nation, who once again can do a little bit of everything. If you look at his stats last year, he had 131 total tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 3 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, 2 interceptions, and 2 defensive touchdowns. And so he's only going to get better his senior year. And this is just a prospect, once again, that could come in and really solidify your linebacker spot and be one of the best players in the nation. So he's considering Alabama, Miami, Oklahoma, USC, and Texas A&M in addition to the Longhorns. One advantage that the Longhorns do have is that he has a really good relationship with some of the coaches already, as he's made a visit to the University of Texas. And Chatavian Sanders, one of the tight ends on this team, went to high school with Anthony Hill. So I think Texas has a really good chance to land his recruitment, especially if they continue to make strides on the defensive end this year. And that's definitely your linebacker of the future. You know, your next Agent Zero, per se, Anthony Hill. You know, he's going to come in and be one of the best players on that defense, as he's already one of the best prospects in the nation right now. Moving on to number 34 overall prospect, the number 4 wide receiver, and the number 4 prospect in the state of Texas out of Houston is Jacques Pettaway. Now, I really like him. He can line up inside and outside. He's very efficient at the top of his routes with no wasted movement, gets right into his cuts and is able to separate really effectively from DBs. He has elite run after the catch ability. A lot of times they would just throw him screens and let him break tackles and let him get down the field. And most of the time he took those plays to the house. And, you know, that elite run after the catch ability kind of translates to him being a punt returner and a kick returner. And so what I saw on film is he always makes the first defender miss, and he would be a great playmaker in Sark's system that can come in and you get him the ball in so many different ways on the short to intermediate routes, especially behind the line of scrimmage. Like I said, he caught a lot of screens in high school and just took those the distance, but he runs really good deep routes as well. So many ways to utilize him. Right now, it looks like he's looking between Florida, LSU, Texas, and Texas A&M. But a really explosive playmaker. Once again, the number 34 overall prospect, Jacques Pettaway, could come in and be that wide receiver of the future, and even could play next to Xavier Worthy in his time at the 40 acres if they're able to land his commitment. Moving on, the number 41 overall prospect, the number 5 cornerback, number 6 in the state of Texas, out of Arlington, Javian Toviano. Now, all signs point to Texas landing his commitment. The 24/7 Sports Crystal Ball has Texas at 100% right now. So that's really good. Really fluid in his back pedal. He's able to keep his body square with the ability to plant and go once the receiver has declared in his break. He's really good in press coverage where he doesn't panic and he shows patience, able to mirror the receiver with good eye placement and leverage. When the ball is in the air, he reacts well to the receiver and attacks their hands to make a play. Also shows really good instincts in off coverage and zone coverage as well. Now, he'll be visiting Texas again on April 2nd, but once again, all signs point to the University of Texas landing his recruitment and continuing to shore up that defensive backfield, which was not a strong suit last season. Number 79 in the country, the 10th ranked offensive tackle in the class, 17th in the state out of Texas, out of Arlington. Another really interesting prospect, Isaiah Robinson. So he is 6'8", 280. And he has so much growth and ability left in his game. And so he's a raw prospect right now. And you could teach, somebody to be a better offensive lineman, but you can't teach 6'8", 280. So just a big boy, a power five starter. Eventually is what they're saying his ceiling can be, and an all year, multi-year all conference performer. Excuse me. He's considering Miami, Texas, and USC. Those seem to be his three top schools. So just a huge, a really big player. Once again, 6'8", 280, who could come in and eventually play on that other tackle spot outside of Kelvin Banks. And so he's leaning towards Texas as being one of his top three schools. And I think if you continue to fortify Kyle Flood, continue to fortify that offensive line, Isaiah Robinson would be a big reason for that. 6'8", 280. You come in and just clear lanes for those running backs and make sure nobody gets even near Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, or Malik Murphy. All right, so coming up next on the list, number 83 in the country, the ninth ranked athlete, 18th in the state of Texas, out of Shiner, Texas, Dalton Brooks. Played on both sides. He's dominant as a running back and a defensive back, but he projects as a safety in the college ranks. And so right now, Texas is amongst his top 5 schools. Once again, Dalton Brooks. His brother is Jonathan Brooks, who is on the Texas football team, a running back. But number 9th ranked athlete, 83rd in the country, considering Texas as one of his top 5 schools, could be a safety of the future next to Brian Allen Jr. out of Aledo. And then number 100 in the country, the 5th best interior offensive lineman. This is by Justice Finkley from this year's class. Now, he's not underrated. He's 100th in the country, but a player that I don't think a lot of people will be talking about when we look at this recruiting class if he ultimately signs to Texas, but will have one of the biggest impacts from this year's class. So a really talented interior offensive lineman who I think is one of the more underrated players in this class. I think if you put him and Devin Campbell next to each other for a couple years, they will be a force for years to come for Kyle Flood and that offensive line at the University of Texas. So Harris Sewell out of Odessa, Texas, number 100 in the country, the 5th best interior offensive lineman. If he comes to the University of Texas, that would be one of the best recruits they bring in this class, regardless of who's ranked ahead of him. I'm calling it right now. And then for one player who has already signed, the one commit that Texas already has is Jamel Johnson. He primarily played corner in high school, but he projects as a safety in college. And so he's a really good player, like 150th, somewhere around that range in the country. And of course, they're looking to build on that and add more prospects as the year continues to go on. But Jamel Johnson is a really good player as well, who will come in and make a lot of plays for the Texas Longhorns at the 40 acres on this defense. Coming up next, Sark announces his spring roster. I'll tell you what stood out to me. But first, a word from our sponsors. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. March Madness is only a few weeks away. That means you need to start thinking now about where you're going to be running your brackets this year. Are you going for the usual, or are you looking for the best? We've done our homework here, and we're running brackets with RunYourPool.com. Along with standard brackets, RunYourPool offers game types like Survivor or Pick X. They have options to edit scoring, and they offer more intel to make your picks. All stuff you won't find at ESPN or CBS. If you've got a business, Run Your Pool can help you take some of that madness magic and play alongside your employees or even gain customers. Plus, they offer full white glove customer support, custom branding, and one of the easiest 3-minute setups you'll ever find. Clearly, we believe Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/locked-on. And while you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. All the rules and details will be available there. That's runyourpool.com/locked-on for your chance to win a cash prize. We look forward to seeing and beating you there. All right. So Sark announced his spring roster ahead of the spring practices, which start on March 22nd of this month. So some quick highlights on what I thought, what stood out to me from the spring roster. So the first thing was DeMarvion Overshown is listed as 221 pounds, which is lower than he was last year. I thought the key was for him to beef up a little bit more and show a better proficiency in stopping up the run, and just beefing up at size. 221 pounds is still a little low for a linebacker. And so I'm not saying that he won't have a better year or he won't be able to do that. But it'll be interesting to see what his weight is going into the season and how that affects him and his ability to get in the trenches and stop the run next year. Chatavian Sanders, who I think by the end of the year will get the majority of the targets at the tight end position. I know people like Jaleel Billingsley, but Chatavian Sanders is a freak. He is down from 255 pounds to 248, and so I think he'll be even more explosive next year. Look for him to be the starting tight end once again by the end of the season and a player that could be an early round draft pick in the NFL. He's that freaky talented. My pet of the 2022 recruiting class, Justice Finkley. He's listed at 6'2", 260 already. I've said he's going to come in as a rotational pass rusher on obvious passing downs and third downs. But just seeing that he's beefed up to 260 already, I think he makes an immediate impact this year. And of course, as an early enrollee, Malik Murphy is 6'5" with a cannon, has really, really good size. And that could set up for a very interesting battle down the road between him and hopefully Arch Manning. So Malik Murphy, just huge. And he's got probably the best arm, the strongest arm at the University of Texas right now. Ryan Watts, so the transfer from Ohio State at cornerback, is listed as 6'3", 210 pounds. So he's huge for a corner. Definitely a bigger physical corner. Now, he might struggle with smaller, shiftier receivers, probably have to play primarily on the outside, but he should be able to lock down bigger pass catchers. And even at times, if you need to, I could probably put him on a linebacker with that size. Once again, 6'3", 210 pounds. Ryan Watts, the transfer from Ohio State. Jalen Ford is listed at 228 pounds. Luke Brockermeyer is listed at 213 pounds. And so I think specifically Jalen Ford and Agent Zero are going to be the two linebackers you see on the field the most this year. But while they bring a lot of speed and playmaking, our defensive line definitely is going to have to be key and consistently winning in the trenches and making sure that offensive linemen do not get to that second level and eat up our smaller linebackers. So they're going to have to be able to play in space and roam around once again because they're just so small. At 228 and 221 pounds, you're going against 300-pound offensive linemen. If they're able to get to the second level, you're going to see that rushing defense, which was 111th ranked in the country. There won't be much of a difference this year. So this is just a funny one. Our punter weighs 219 pounds, 2 pounds less than DeMarvion Overshown, Agent Zero. I just thought that was funny. Jake Majors, 6'3", 313 pounds, big boy. Really going to need a big year out of him for an improved O-line. So I know people have said, well, we brought in 7 offensive linemen in this class. The offensive line is going to be much beefed up, much improved. Well, only 1 out of those 7 offensive linemen commits is enrolled early. And so I think Sark will probably lean on experience earlier in the season rather than just trotting out a bunch of true freshmen that didn't even get to participate in spring ball. And so Jake Majors is going to have to be a big reason that this offensive line improves next year, as well as whoever are the 4 starters around him. Keondre Coburn is listed at 340 pounds. That's just a big man. I saw you got the NIL deal with Hooters, but 340 pounds, that stuck out to me. That's really big. And then, of course, Quinn Ewers, your starting quarterback for the Longhorns this year. I hope I'm beating, the table for it. We'll be wearing number 3 with that signature mullet. So those are the things that stood out to me on Sark's spring roster heading into the first spring practice once again on Tuesday, March 22nd. I'm super excited to see what comes out of these practices and ultimately what happens in the orange and white game next month in April. Coming up next, your Texas Longhorns baseball team did lose a game, but they're still 11-1, still the best team in the country, and we give them some praise here on Locked On Longhorns. Man, do I love March Madness. And I love those brackets, but I can't remember the last time I actually went deep or even won any money. I'm hedging my bets this year with StatHero's NCAA Pick'em contest. StatHero's NCAA single game pick'ems pits the star players against each other in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. Take control back from those handicappers that always seem to have the advantage. Start focusing on the players you know best with a gameplay that doesn't rely on big spreads, long odds, or funky props. Stat Hero gives you the advantage, resulting in their gamers winning 4 times more often. Why? Because Stat Hero eliminates the mystery about who or what you are going up against. They simply post sets of players for you to take on a set of players you choose. Stat Hero is the easiest and fastest way to get your sport action fix. The simple, sleek gameplay will have you playing in minutes. This is what daily fantasy was meant to be. Sign up for free right now at stathero.com/locked on and use promo code for 100% deposit match. That's stathero.com/locked on. Use promo code locked on for a 100% match. stathero.com/locked on. Promo code locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Hungry? Try Built Bar, especially the Puffs. If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. At Built Bar, they are all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, really quick update on your Texas Longhorns baseball team. They came down to Houston over the weekend for the Shriners Classic, which included other schools like Oklahoma, Baylor, Tennessee, LSU, UCLA, and Texas. And they started off 2-0 in the Shriners Classic on Friday and Saturday nights, beating Tennessee and LSU really handily. We saw Tristan Stevens, who's just been amazing this year, is now 3-0, still has not allowed a run on Saturday against LSU, was dominant in 6 innings. But the Texas baseball team ultimately fell to UCLA yesterday. I was at that game. Of course, the one game I go to is their first loss of the season, and they just couldn't get anything going offensively. Tanner Witt was scratched from his start. They said it was more precautionary than anything, so I think he'll be able to come back and make his next scheduled start. But they fell to a UCLA team that was hot and scored 13 runs the day before, and I just thought they jumped on the pitching early, made some really good base running decisions. When they had runners in scoring position, were able to bring them in via the sac fly or just timely base hits. And the Texas offense couldn't get anything going outside of a Hispanic Titanic home run, which was a pleasure to see in Minute Maid in Houston. And so they're going to bounce back. Once again, this is still the best team in the country, still the best roster, best pitching staff from top to bottom. They weren't going to go undefeated this year. They're still the number 1 team in the country. And, I just got to give them some praise. Once again, I know that we were kind of the way they were dominating everybody. We thought this team would never lose, and we knew when they lost, it was going to hurt. But once again, this is the best team in college baseball, still the favorites to end up in Omaha and win the College World Series. And once again, they'll bounce back. They play at Texas State on Tuesday, and they should be able to get a win there. So thank you all for tuning in to Locked On Longhorns, your daily number 1 source for all things Texas athletics, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For my audio listeners, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube for exclusive content and to put a face behind the voice of your favorite podcast. And of course, make sure you like us, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. Anything less than that, I have to believe you're not listening hard enough. Thank you, Longhorn Nation. Peace.